Welcome to Write Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. I'm your host, Kitty Bucholtz, and this is episode 101, Querying and Getting the Call, an interview with Claire Eliza Bartlett, coming to you on Thursday, October 4th, 2018. There are few things that writers love more than hearing another writer tell about some exciting story in their writing life. One of those great stories is, and then I got this email or this phone call and an agent asked to represent me, and now we've been working together happily all this time. And then one of the other great stories is, and then my agent called me and said, guess what? We've sold your book. Yay! So Claire's going to tell us about both of these wonderful calls and how it has affected her life and changed her writing trajectory. This is also going to be a multi-part series, so to speak. There's going to be at least 2 episodes because we'll have Claire back again in April after her book comes out to tell us all about the things that have happened in between here and there, but mostly about the excitement of seeing her book actually hit the shelves and the probable mania involved in the initial marketing when the book first comes out. So it should be really fun. We'll watch how a first book goes from zero to hero. So that'll be lots of fun, but that will be 6 months from now. Today, we're going to hear about those first 2 wonderful calls and the things that have happened as Claire has gotten this far in the process. So it'll be lots of fun. One of the things that we talked about really briefly in the interview was the cider festival that we just went to. And I just wanted to tell you about it real quick because if you are like me, you love fall colors and all things autumn. And I was so excited to be able to, after living in so many places and other countries where they don't really have kind of the Michigan fall colors that I grew up with and that I still say that I'm used to, even though there's a lot of it that I haven't really seen that much of. But we were taking the train to the Chivik Cider Festival, and the bus driver told me it was not Kivik, it was Chivik. I'm almost positive I'm saying it correctly now. And it was me and John this past weekend, and our friends Tammy and Dave came over from Scotland, who actually used to be our neighbors in California, and they came over to visit and sightsee, and we all went to the cider festival together. And a couple of times I passed on the bus what must have been a red maple or something like it, because there were these bright red leaves all throughout the whole tree. And I was so happy. Totally my fall happy place. Very, very just thrilled to pieces. And I would have taken pictures if the bus weren't going so fast and I had known that I should be having my camera out. So if you have any fall colors or cool autumn stuff happening in your area, send me a picture. I want to see. I can only hope that Melma is also going to get some fall colors. I have no idea since this is the first time that I've lived here. But one of the other really cool things was while we were over there and we were drinking cider and eating donuts and eating apple cake, and it was so fun. Oh, and I'm used to caramel covered apples, but we saw chocolate covered apples. And so we bought a couple of those on sticks. That was awesome. But when John and I went through the cider taste testing tent from all these different apple farms and apple orchards and all these places that were making different ciders. And one of the guys started talking to us about, well, who knows what, but somehow the conversation got to be on Michigan. And he said, do you know where Gaylord is? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I practically, like my whole life and all of my family is all up in that northern Michigan area. So of course I know where that is. And then we were talking about his family, and he has family here and there, and John and I are from here and there in Michigan. And oh, it just made me feel like home. I mean, Michigan colors, Michigan flavors, and then talking to somebody who'd been to Michigan, I'm like, oh, I'm in so much of a happy kitty place. So again, if you have pictures, send them to me. I will very much enjoy them. My Twitter handle is just Kitty Bucholtz, just my name, KittyBucholtz, spelling it out so that you can send me a picture. Okay, so that was my really exciting fall colors, autumn festival kind of moment that I just had to tell you a little bit more about because I didn't want to interrupt the interview to talk about it too much there. But one actually important tip that I thought of yesterday that I need to share with you is Organize your work now. Even if you only have 1 or 2 books, or you don't have a series yet, so you feel like there's really no need for you to get organized, you'll get organized later. If you're like, I'm never going to move like you move, Kitty, so I don't have to worry about being organized. Whatever your reasons are, ignore them and just get organized. So I'm working on Love at the Clip and Curl, which is book 2 of the Strays of Loon Lake series. And I knew there was some things in Love at the Fluff and Fold that I needed to pull into book 2, and I was going to make some notes and stuff. But oh my gosh, the number of files of different things, even Scrivener files. The whole point of a Scrivener file is to put everything in one file so you don't lose it anymore like I used to in Word when I had 42 files. But I found some stuff that I was like, why is this even here? Like, I don't even think this is technically a Strays of Loon Lake book, but this is where I found the notes for this part. One of those files dated back to 2007. It said it was created in 2007. First of all, I wasn't even published in 2007, and I most certainly do not remember thinking about the Strays of Loon Lake books. I was totally working on other things, so I'm not sure why I have these ideas in my head for so long. And then apparently I'm using them later. So now it's 11 years later. So I'm just saying, just in case you're writing down notes about something that you think you might work on soon, or it's just an idea and you have no idea it'll be 10 years until you actually get that idea into print, organize your work. I have so many different files that say list of characters, and not all the characters have the same first or last names. Not all of the businesses have the same names. And so yesterday and well into last night was definitely more of the, okay, just no, you can't eat chocolate to get through this. You're going to get fat if you keep eating chocolate every time. You just like need that emotional boost. You're just going to have to do it. So I had Netflix playing in the background, and oh my gosh, all the organizing. So do it now. It won't take so long later. Tip from Kitty, learn from my mistakes. All right, so we're going to get into the interview. If you're watching on YouTube, I apologize about the lack of light in the video. I actually have lights shining on me, and it is 9:30 in the morning, and yet the video looks like I'm in a dark room. So very sorry. I am working on lighting. I just have to figure it all out. It's different here, and I'm really afraid to put holes in the ceiling by myself. But apparently that's what I have to do. So just haven't had the courage to do it yet. So I will get some better lighting, but in the meantime, the most important part is the interview with Claire, and you can see her perfectly fine. She has great lighting behind her. I hope that you enjoy her wonderful stories, and we'll come back and hear more of her stories in 6 months. But in the meantime, have a great week and enjoy the show. Today's guest is Claire Bartlett. Claire Eliza Bartlett is a U.S. citizen who grew up in Colorado. While her great love is writing, she studied history and archaeology and perfected the art of living abroad, spending time in Switzerland and Wales before settling in Denmark for good. She writes sci-fi, fantasy, short fiction, and novels, and when not at her computer telling mostly false stories, she works as a tour guide in Copenhagen, telling stories that are mostly true. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love your intro.
I enjoy it. We worked a lot on it.
Yeah. I noticed you've got some really fun things in the way that you put normally very bland, dry headers and stuff on your website, you know, and it instead you like use these like crazy phrases like promises I make to you if you sign up to my newsletter instead of my privacy policy is.
I try.
It's good. Well, there you go. I mean, obviously, you're a storyteller.
Yeah, I've gotten used to it over the years. I guess that's why I'm still a tour guide after 6.5 years of doing that job as well.
You know, even though you and I live in different countries, we are probably 20 or 30 minutes apart by train.
I love that. I love that about Europe. I think that's amazing.
It's cool. I'm totally getting used to it. You've obviously been used to it for quite a long time now, over a decade, but this is all brand new to me.
When I lived in Switzerland, I actually lived in Italian-speaking Switzerland. I like to call it the least Swiss part of Switzerland. And we were just 3 miles from the border with Italy. So on On a day when we had nothing to do, we could walk down to Italy.
Oh my gosh. Let's just go have some wine and some bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I think of when I think of Italy. I have no idea what's really there.
Yeah, a lot of wine.
Yeah.
For sure. The wine festival had really delicious grapes, I'll tell you that much.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, I will have to tell you there's a cider festival coming up in Sweden in 2 weeks, so I'll tell you more about it after. Yeah, it's 2 hours by train from here, so probably 2.5 hours from you. But we'll talk about that later. There's probably not that many people listening who are like, oh yeah, I could totally go to that.
Yeah. Why not? Cider festivals in Sweden.
I know, right? I'm excited. I'm not a beer girl. I'm a cider girl or wine or something like that. So,
yeah.
Well, so aside from the fact that I totally want to book myself on a tour that you're giving, right now we really should be talking about your book. So this is very exciting times for you. You are about ready to have your very first novel published.
Yes, that's right. With Little Brown, a young adult fantasy novel.
Excellent. And it's called?
Exciting. It's called We Rule the Night. Oh, I should have brought my visual aid with me, because I actually received a gift-wrapped copy of my first advanced reader copy.
No.
That's sweet.
That is
my
adorable.
Editor is just the greatest. Hallie, if you're listening, I love you. So.
Now, you and I met at a writers group very recently. I think we met in July, and then we had our first writers group meeting in August here in Malmö, Sweden. So you actually go to another country for this particular writers group.
Yeah, well, it's not a big deal. I could drive there if I could get the car, if I could wrestle the car away from my husband.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you and I just recently met and have been talking about your experiences as about to be a newly published author. Well, I mean, but you've already been published in short fiction. So yes, in fact, one of those stories I need to know. So I kind of sort of at some point, probably in like English class, knew that Hans Christian Andersen was from Denmark. But then those facts just fly out of my head in the course of everyday life over the next couple of decades. And then when we were there, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right. So tell us about your story, The Little Match Girl.
Oh, yeah. Well, so that was actually written after the editor of that anthology put some pressure on me. The editor of that anthology was Karina Bisset. And she's pretty amazing as well. She does some classes for short fiction. I took her class, Monstrous Women, around this time last year. It is just as amazing as it sounds. Nice. And I also took a class, Science Fiction Fairy Tale Intersections, with her. And it's all about, looking at fairy tales in a new light and mashing them up with some science fiction. And for many, many years, I've wanted to write about Copenhagen in a futuristic setting, because I think it makes for an excellent dystopian concept. So The Little Match Girl, I decided to do that mashup of a dystopian idea of Copenhagen and how I see it in the future, drawing on some of my tour guide knowledge of all of the places around us, and also on this strong literary tradition of Hans Christian Andersen, and what the different literary devices he brings to the table, which are not always positive, and the different sort of things we can bring into that.
Nice.
So.
Now, I didn't actually click through on every one of the links on your publications page, but so you have a website, it has a publications tab, and then this is where I read about your short stories. Is this one that people can click on that link and go read it? Do they need to purchase anything, or can they read it on the, website, I guess, of the publisher?
I believe that it's for sale. It's Non-Binary Review number 14, published by Zoetic Press. But I think it's the only one of my stories that is not available for free online. So, and it's a huge volume as well. My contributor copy was massive. So I think for the money you spend, you get it. You get your time.
Nice, nice. Now, tell us just so that I don't say it wrong. Your author website is Author
authorclaire.com.
Claire, and that's
www.authorclaire.com.
okay. Claire.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay,
Not like Cassandra Clare, the other Claire.
the other Claire.
Yeah. Sort of like the general Anglo Claire.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. Good. Good. Now I'm sitting here going, how does Claire in Outlander spell her name? Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't read Outlander, so
Oh yeah,
not
it's
sure.
been a while, so I can't
Yeah.
remember. But I have to say, your name when I was reading it in my head, I was giggling, going, "Oh my gosh, you sound like a Little Women character."
Well, I did so I selected this name. It's my pen name,
Okay.
you are familiar with. And I did select it to be a sort of representation of you know, an Anglo-Saxon Western woman. So the idea is you can sort of visualize what I look like from my name.
Yeah,
I wanted to do that.
I like it. I like it. Well, I'm sure, I really do think if Joe from Little Women were living today in 2018, she also would have blue, green, and purple hair like you.
I hope so.
Well, so tell us a little bit more about, you know what, start wherever you like, but
Okay.
if you want to do it in chronological order or any other order. So I'm sure that listeners would love to hear, because I don't think we've had anybody on yet telling the story about when they received, and it used to be an actual phone call, but now things tend to be by email. When you received the call that a literary agent was interested in representing you, and then when she or whoever gave you the call that you have a book contract. So tell us a little about your story.
Yeah. Okay. So my story is a young adult fantasy. We Rule the Night, and it's about the daughter of a general and the daughter of a trader who are forced to be co-pilots flying magical planes in an epic war. And they can't stand each other, but they're going to have to learn to work together, or else the war is going to destroy them. And that's the general idea. Um, I finished the book in like 2016 in sort of the summertime. I had written it, I had revised it, I'd gone through like an editing class with it to try and make it as strong as possible. And then I decided at the end of the summer, now is the time to start querying. So the first thing I did was not actually query. I entered a bunch of contests, and not like Twitter contests, but I entered a bunch of like first 5-page contests and writing like first page contests. And those are really beautiful. The judges are always really dedicated. They want to give authors the chance to shine and help them out a lot. So I was always receiving feedback. I think every contest I entered, I received feedback from at least one judge. And I also often got feedback from other contestants. So they really
Oh,
helped me
wow.
strengthen my query. And starting from September, I went into the query phase. And I would do about a query a day.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't religiously, but it was nice. It was a good pace for me. I like to fret about things, so it was nice to take my mind, like I could focus on doing something about my situation of not having an agent rather than sending out a bunch of queries and then waiting around, um, very worried for a while. And thankfully, because I'd gotten so much query feedback from all these contests, I had a pretty high request rate based off of queries. So
Great.
I I got so first I got the initial email saying let's chat from my agent on January 1st,
Wow.
which is also my birthday.
Oh,
So
that's
it was a beautiful
awesome.
day. And it was really funny because I was making dinner with my sister. She was coming to visit me, and I got an email from this agent who had my full manuscript, and I thought, there's no way I can be getting a rejection on New Year's Day. And I didn't. She wanted to meet. So we scheduled a
Uh,
call, and we did call over Skype.
mhm.
We had a phone call, and we talked for like an hour, I think, about an hour.
Wow.
Kirsten is very editorial, so she likes to discuss like how she sees the novel going and what changes she envisions making to the novel before submitting it to publishers. So we talked a lot about what we would change. And then at the end, since we seemed to be on the same page, she made the offer of representation. And because I'd been sending out a novel a day, I had a lot of novels or agents who needed to hear back from me. So we
Right.
also agreed to a 10-day waiting period where I would uh, give any other agents who wanted the chance to offer for me as well.
Mhm.
So I got some other offers, but ultimately I went with Kirsten. I really liked the direction she wanted to take my novel in,
Yeah.
and that was great. Then after formally accepting it, we went through all the paperwork. It takes a little while to get the paperwork going, especially if you live abroad. You get your contract
Right.
mailed to you. Some
Uh,
things in publishing are still like really, really behind the times.
a little 20th century.
Yeah, very much so. So then we did do some editing rounds. We had 2 rounds of edits that I did with her. And I also did some sensitivity reads because my main character is a double amputee. So I was making sure that this book was not going to be too offensive, harmful, had some good representation. So then we went out on submission in, I would say, around May, end of May.
Okay.
So it took us about 4 months we were working on revisions together.
Yeah.
So then we were out for a little while, and we got word that an editor was interested, but not ready to make an offer yet. And they wanted to have a phone call, basically, to discuss changes they envisioned for the novel.
Okay.
And I did end up getting 2 offers from publishing houses. And it's amazing how different, like, the visions of different editors and agents can be.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting thing to see. They both wanted to go in very different directions. So in many ways, it was just a question of which direction did I feel was more accurate to what I'd originally written.
Yeah. Now, if I could interrupt with a question
Hmm.
here. I know that this is not uncommon in publishing for some agents are not editorially hands-on,
Yeah,
and others are very kind of deep dive in.
yeah.
So when you initially, I'm sure you probably already knew this because you've been writing for a while. You've been part of writers groups and that sort of thing. So you
Hmm.
knew that this was a possibility, right?
Yes.
That you might get an editorial style
Oh,
agent.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. So when you initially got the ideas for changes from her, part of
Hmm.
the reason this is a question, part of the reason why you went with her and went ahead and did the changes is because you really thought that she got your novel and that these changes would make it better.
Oh, yes, definitely. Like, one of the cool things I felt and still feel about Kirsten is that she feels sort of like she's giving me advice from myself, but 6 months in the future when I've had a chance to really think about it.
Yeah.
So I do feel that she has a strong understanding of the way I see story. She also doesn't have, like, where I've been concerned, she hasn't provided me with a lot of solutions. She hasn't been telling me how to write the novel, but she's been saying, like, this needs to be stronger. And we talked about the pace of We Rule the Night. We talked about, like, some of the things we could bring in together. So she's also very keen on making sure that I'm fixing the novel the way I want to. But I do feel that her editing style matches with mine. And that was ultimately why I decided to go with her as well. One of the best pieces of advice I received was from an editor that I know, who said that, like, the most important thing in an agent is making sure that your editorial styles match up and that you think you can work together long term. So
Yeah. And so then when you got to the point where now you had 2 offers from 2 editors, so 2 different publishing
yeah,
houses,
yeah,
then you had to ask yourself these questions again. Is that right?
yeah. Of course, the visions that these different editors had were so different that it was not actually as hard as picking an agent. It was very much like, who did I feel had a more aligning vision for my book. And there was like Little Brown was definitely the publisher that had a vision that was more similar to what I'd originally considered.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so again, did you feel, and I'm asking you, this podcast is never about saying anything derogatory or negative about anyone or any place. So I'm not digging for dirt here. I'm just asking. So when you were getting these editorial notes, were you thinking to yourself, okay, I see that she's telling me that she feels like something needs to be improved here. I'm not 100% sure that I agree. Do you ever feel like, I'm not sure that I agree, but I understand she's trying to make it better. So what can I do that I will still like and she will like? I'm asking this partially because the listeners will need to understand how this works. And so getting inside your head will help people.
Well, so do you mean like before I accepted an offer or after?
After, when now you need to have an agreeable solution for everyone.
So for me, that was really rare that I felt that she was making that my editor is Hallie Tibbetts, and it was very rare that I felt she was making a suggestion that I didn't agree with, actually, and it was always on something kind of superficial. That's one of the things that I really appreciate about Hallie as well, is that she's also very much, she points out problems, but she doesn't she doesn't provide concrete solutions that she thinks I should take. She definitely brings in, like, she spitballs some ideas about how I could improve it, but she's always very clear to say that I can do something else. I can pick something else if I think it will solve the problem. And so when I've had like questions about what the problem is or whether something will be a good solution, I can just shoot her an email, or we've done some phone calls about it sometimes, and we've always been able to resolve it.
Excellent.
So again, like one of the biggest things, right? Getting an editor that you also feel has a strong respect for the vision you've brought to the work. So it's been lovely. It's been really great. It's been a lot of hard work. We did 4 rounds of editing on this novel from October through February, basically. And
so you got an offer sometime in May, paperwork had to go through, and then you started working on edits in October?
The offer went through, I think, in the end of July.
Oh, that's right. You started sending out around May.
Yeah, we started sending out around May. It was like 6 weeks or so before we got the first responses. And then at the end of July, it was all set up. We had formally accepted an offer from Little Brown. It was another 9 months before I got my contract.
Oh, of course.
So, welcome to the land of publishing. But we were working on edits from, I think I actually got my first edits in like mid-September.
Oh, wow.
And we were working on that all the way through.
That's pretty quick considering, summertime, I was always told by my editor, don't expect a lot during the summertime because everybody, including agents and editors, you go on vacation and have things to do. So
I also thought when we went out at the beginning of summer, I was like, okay, it's going to be at least the end of summer before I get any replies at all. I'm not even going to bother my agent until September about whether we've gotten answers or anything. And then in the middle of summer. So it really, and one thing she said at the time was that she hasn't seen a large difference in sort of editor responses and so on.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, maybe there's been a change, or maybe just, it was, oh gosh, more than 10 years ago that I was working with an agent. So
maybe our terrible work culture is pushing people to work all the time from wherever.
Yeah, well, sadly, I do feel bad for the editors that I do know who their workload only increases as things change. I feel bad for them. Yeah. Okay, so you get this offer, and are you bouncing around? Are you thinking, I'm stunned? I can't believe this. It's about ready to happen. Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, I was super excited. I've always felt that this book has like a strong hook to it and has a definite place in the market. It's a diesel punk novel. It sort of mixes some technology and magic. It has a lot of the World War II elements that a lot of young adult novels have, but I brought in some of the World War II technology as well. And It's also based on a true story that I think is pretty incredible.
Oh.
The story of the Night Witches, who are these Russian female pilots.
Yes, I saw an article in, I don't know, somewhere, and I sent it to like three of my writer friends, and I said,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, have you read about them?" And apparently, all of my friends who write any kind of historical anything, they're they very kindly were like, "Yeah, isn't it a great story?" Yes, of course I've heard of them. I was like, these people
Well,
are crazy interesting, but tell us a little bit more about, yeah,
yeah,
who
they
they are.
are really fantastic. It's a really fantastic story, and I think that it has in recent years become more of a it's become more of a like a widespread story. But they were women, and honestly, they were many of them young adults. I think the youngest of them was 16 years old in 1943 when this Air Force was sort of founded. And their job was to keep the Germans from sleeping, basically on the front lines at night. So they would fly these little planes, and these were like training, they were really old training planes. I don't know how much World War II history the average podcast listener should know, but in
Yeah.
1943, Hitler essentially moved on Russia and he destroyed the entire Air Force. So they had to start over. And they started over with these terrible training planes that my favorite fun fact is they were so slow that the Germans couldn't actually catch them because if the Germans slowed down enough to catch them, their own airplanes would stall. So these Russian planes were small or slower than the stall speed of a German airplane.
That's
And they
very
just
interesting.
incredible. They flew so low to the ground that the Germans could shoot them with rifles from the ground as well.
Wow.
So they had these terrible jobs, and they would fly up to 18 hours a night, going out, dropping bombs, and bombarding the front lines. So they were amazing, and their story is amazing as well. And what struck me personally about the story is that they really stuck together. These women, they had a very sort of strong community together. They didn't operate entirely in the same way that the male aviators were expected to operate. So they had a different community than the usual sort of Army community. And after the war, for many years, the Soviet Union pretended they never existed at all.
Wow.
So
So
I
these
wanted
women
to bring
weren't
all of
even
that in.
recognized as heroes, maybe until after their deaths, or
Yes, I think the last of the Night Witches is now dead, just a couple of years ago. But it was so 1984, I think, is the first book in English that I began to read about it. And I think that it's one of those things that maybe you could find if you dug around, particularly in Russian,
yeah.
but it was like it's becoming a larger story as more people hear about it and write about it. But they make songs about it. People have written like role-playing games about it. So it is becoming a bit more of a thing now. And there are like three other young adult novels that have used the Night Witches as either historical fiction or as a jumping off point, like We Rule the Night. So
Nice. So you had this idea in your head that you might want to use it for something, and then you kind of took it in this really alternate history, magical,
yeah,
and
it came very suddenly, I will say. Um, it's kind of ridiculous, but so I am a little bit of a metal fan, and I had some friends here who had bought tickets to a Sabaton concert. Sabaton, they're a Swedish metal band, so
okay.
you can always go take a listen. But they, of course, that means they can come to Copenhagen quite often, and I was invited to go to this concert. When one of them couldn't go, I decided to listen to some of their more recent music to remind myself, um, what Sabaton's doing lately. And this was one of their songs. It was about the Night Witches. And the more I read, the more fascinated I was. And eventually I just knew, like, this is going to be a novel. And I got all the books out, and I bought all the biographies and so on. And I started basically writing down, like, this is going to be a scene, this is going to be a scene. And so it was a very clear concept from the beginning.
That's awesome. Now, if I remember right, this is book one of more than one book. So is that right? I'm
Well,
saying
we'll
that because I'm
see.
not sure if there was a series or not, or
We'll see. I think it'd be amazing to do a series, but we're waiting for now to see, how the first one does.
yeah,
I've got some grand ideas for more if people
yeah.
want more. And right now, the second book in my contract with Little Brown, it's looking like it'll be something a little bit different,
Uh-huh.
but hopefully still fun.
Yeah. Excellent. So, if somebody said, what kind of author are you? I mean, is it almost always YA? Or because I think that I read in your bio, like you do these things in YA, but these things in adults.
Yeah, I feel like I write more adult short stories for sure. And I'd love to write YA short stories, but I haven't been able to crack the code in a way yet. So it's something that it's a project I'm currently working on. But I really enjoy short fiction, reading and writing it. So that's definitely something I want to keep doing.
Yeah. I have to say that again, looking over your author page, I was like, all right, I have to go read what a 50-word short story is and what a 350
Yeah.
word short story is. Because I wrote what was going to be a short story introduction to one of my superhero novels. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll just make it a novella. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm still going to put the word novella on the cover, even though it's 45,000 words, which in romance is a short novel. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So I might have a problem with using too few or using too many words.
I think it's also short stories. I feel like they're simpler in many ways, right? They're not necessarily simpler in language. In fact, I think you can be even more complex with language and theme in a short story
Yeah.
sometimes than you can be in a novel. But plot-wise, they can't have too much stuff going on, or they're not going to be short for very long. So,
Yeah, I think that's my problem is that I'm usually thinking of 3 or 4 different things that in the end they braid and weave together to get to this ending. And in a short story, I'm like, okay, I have to have one plot line that gets to the ending I want it to get to and have an interesting kind of like, ooh, that was cool. I'm like, I don't know if
yeah.
I know how to do that with only one plot line.
I'm going to say it takes practice for sure. Like, I think that anyone can learn how to write
Yeah.
a novel or a short story. It's all about structure and practice, but it is
Yeah.
definitely, I think that that's not uncommon. Like, I certainly was the same way when I started off writing short stories. They would get to novel length, and it was
Yeah.
very hard to keep them down.
And on the other hand, I know, at least a half a dozen people who they are absolutely convinced they could never write a novel. I'm a short story writer. I just wouldn't know how to make something into 50 or 80,000 words. And I'm like, oh, I bet you probably could though. But I think it does have to do with what's in your head. And I think honestly, a lot of people are like, I like what I write.
Yeah, and if you don't have interest in writing something, like it's so much work. Why should you write something you don't really have an interest in writing?
Right. Yeah, that's me with anything history related. I love reading alternate history work, so I'm excited to read yours.
Right.
But yeah, in like 8 more months or something.
Yeah. I always fear the alternate history appellation because I really don't feel like I did the sort of work that it's required for real alternate history.
Yeah.
Real. But it's definitely a secondary world fantasy, very heavily based off of history. Um, I'd compare it more to maybe like Guy Gabriel Kay, if you know him.
No, I don't.
Who I love him a lot. He's a great, great writer, and he definitely does. He does fantasy that is so heavily inspired by history. You can see very clearly where it's coming from.
Oh,
So I do
wow.
recommend him if you like historical.
Yeah. All right. We'll put his name and a link to wherever we can find him in the show
Okay.
notes so that people can come and find out. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I don't know who that is, but now I definitely want to see what he's got. Because honestly, that probably would appeal to me slightly more. It's the massive amounts of research that reminds me of high school. that
Yes.
I was like, no, I don't want to do anything that requires research of something dry and boring. But the thing is that I do tons of research of other things. So the point is, research what you
Yeah.
think is interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's one of the things that I think I'm working on making my brand. It's sort of this weird histories that just make you giggle to read about them. They are
Awesome.
out there for anyone who might think that historical research can be dull. There are some really fantastically hysterical and brilliant historical um, small stories that you don't hear about in the wider web of history.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, I'm definitely going to be asking you for any links to anything interesting that I can put in the show notes for people. Okay, so this is totally cool. I love talking about people, getting the call and how exciting it is and
Yeah.
how much work it is. So now
Yes.
you're at a so give us the release date for We Rule the Night is
It is April 2nd, 2019.
excellent.
Yeah.
So the book's turned in. You've already got your first advanced review copy that was
Yeah.
so kindly gift wrapped. So sweet. I want your editor.
She's so brilliant. It was honestly the sweetest thing. And then my husband read me the note on the inside of the cover where it's sort of a personal note from her to the
Oh,
readers. And I almost cried. It was so sweet.
oh.
Uh, it's
Okay. So you've got book in hand and yet still 6 months to go. So tell us what's
yeah.
the next steps? What are you working on now? What do you have to do for
Yeah.
them? And how much of it is wait or how much of it is wait by working on book two?
Yeah. So what I got to do now is work on a second book that was part of the deal. Little Brown bought 2 books from me in the initial deal. And we're still at the proposal stage because I have a problem with overworking. I believe you have talked before on your show about burnout.
Yes,
And
sadly.
yeah, I experienced that massively at the beginning of the year. Um, of course, like at that time, we had I think through January and February, I had 3 rounds of edits that I was doing. 2 of
Wow.
them were very intense for me. Like our third round of editing, um, our second round of editing opened up some plot holes in the third act of the novel, which meant that I rewrote a ton of the third act in my
Wow.
third round of editing, which made the book a lot stronger. We're happy about it, but it was a lot of work. And at the same time, I was still waiting on my contract, so I hadn't
Ouch.
been paid. So I needed some money. So I've been doing some ghostwriting online for other people. So I picked up a couple of those jobs, which can be pretty intense as well. You've got to write a lot in a short amount of time to make it a viable job. And at the same time, I do these tour guiding. And we had some illnesses on the team. At that point, I was being pulled in to cover a lot. We had some people going on vacation because January and February are great times to leave cold Copenhagen, where nobody wants to go on vacation and get a walking tour. So I would work at the height of my edits, I was working 18 hours a day, and I was throwing temperature. And I just after that stopped for a month, and
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. I couldn't get my proposal together.
Oh,
In publishing, nothing is certain. So after my first proposal, after I wrote it up, Little Brown said no, thank you. So I had to start from the drawing board.
wow.
Which it's definitely something that's going to happen, I think, to authors who pursue traditional publishing deals, right?
Yeah.
The publisher either has another book that's similar that they're already working with, or they've tried that style before and it hasn't worked out monetarily for them.
Right.
So, they want you to try again. And it's just it went all through the summer. The slow summer that I didn't experience with my debut kicked in for this one. So we're still working on the proposal for it. But
Yeah.
I love this book as well. It's got some more historical vibes. It's got an ice palace in it.
Oh,
It's
awesome.
got this sort of creepy underwater kingdom in it. It's got
Nice.
one of those sort of fake marriage tropes that
Nice.
I'm really looking forward to writing. So I hope it's going to go well. And that's the next step, right? Work on that book. That's tentatively scheduled for publication in spring 2020.
Okay, so they did accept this proposal.
Not yet,
Okay, well,
but
you
the
were waiting.
book in advance is sort of tentatively scheduled for spring 2020,
Okay.
and which actually means I was supposed to hand it in like this month.
Ah, oops.
Yeah, so exciting. We'll see what happens. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens with the proposal. I believe right now we're scheduled to have a proposal meeting, or my editor's supposed to take it to the meeting
Right.
and see if they'll say yes to it in early October.
Yeah.
So I'll find out then.
You know, you've touched on something else that because self-publishing is so strong and, if anything, getting stronger among the writer world, and traditional publishing still also has so many great pros to it. And so there's lots of reasons why, depending on what you write and what you want from your writing career, then that is a good or best path also. And of course, the people who are doing or want to do both. But one of the things that I've heard from several writers who aren't very familiar with traditional publishing, and since I started in this business in the last century, I do know a little bit more about it than some of my friends. So can you give people a little bit of reassurance? I've heard people say, I'm getting really nervous. I think that I should cut and run from this deal because I still don't have a contract. We're making edits on my book. I haven't gotten, anything written down yet, and yet they're asking me to make these changes and different other things that you've mentioned. Now, it's a slightly maybe different for you that you have an agent who you can trust. And so if she says this is okay, then you can believe it. But some people, there are a couple of houses that you don't need to have an agent. And so those are the people who are really nervous. They didn't need an agent, so they don't have an agent, and they don't really know how this works. So can you tell us a little bit about just, I guess, some bits of reassurance that these things with traditional publishing houses who are not just opened yesterday, that you can trust them.
Yeah. So I think one of the
as well as being a good business person. On your end.
I would say contracts do take time, but I would say if you should get a time frame, right? By this amount of time, you should get your contract. And if you don't have an agent, then I would say once the time frame passes, you should say, so what about that contract? I think an important thing to remember is if you're doing the work, so is the editor who's working with you. And they also don't want to put all of this effort into making an extremely publishable book just to walk away from it with nothing to show for all of their work at the end.
That's an excellent point. I think that maybe that is a forgotten point sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It was something I also reminded myself of because it's so easy to get nervous. Oh, what if they change their minds? But they're doing all this work. I think the biggest thing about a small publisher is, see what's going on. What happened in my case was there were a lot of changes in the contracts department. That made everything take longer. And then somehow something got lost in the cracks, which also happens. Yeah. Which is also why, if you want to be, I'd say, if you're representing yourself, you want to be a good business person, you got to be able to put gentle pressure, I think, on your contact points, your editor, if you're working with just an editor, and no agent. Doing that will ensure that, if there is something that went wrong sort of randomly, you can get it fixed without having to worry for months on end. Yeah, it's interesting because there are, on the one hand, there are so many people who push too hard, and you hear it at an agent editor panel, at a conference, okay, if we say it takes us 6 weeks, please don't email me 2 weeks after you sent me something because I said it takes 6 weeks. On the other hand, I know people who have never contacted
rejected somebody because, well, they said they would get back to me after, 12 weeks. How long's it been? 12 months. You probably should email them. And I know people who have emailed, an agent or an editor that they queried. And as you say, things get lost in the email system. I have more than 5,000 emails in my system. I totally am sure that I've lost something. And sometimes you get, the second, well, send it again. Sorry, I don't know. I don't have it. So it's good to follow up.
Yeah. And that happened with me as well when I got an offer for representation by my agent. One of the agents that had requested a partial, she said, I have no recollection of receiving any more material from you. Just send me over the full.
Yeah.
So good things can come of it as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, this is so interesting. I could talk to you for so long because, writers talking to writers. I swear I say that in almost every episode. But so I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any more. I know that before we started recording, you said that, I got a few things that I wanted to, tell people in case it was helpful. So have we covered it? Yeah. Is there some more things? We've been talking about querying, which was kind of our point in a way.
Yeah. I would say, like, for authors who want to get their start and query agents and go for the traditional publishing route, I've got a few, like, other pieces of advice, I guess.
Yeah.
I wrote them down very helpfully too.
Excellent.
To remember them. I said at the beginning that I entered a lot of contests before querying in earnest, and that's definitely a piece of advice I would have. Like, Twitter contests are great, but like contests where you get feedback on your, like, critical feedback on your work. That made my query so much stronger. That definitely, it's a way to cut through some of the time and get some direct push on how to make your work better. And I think that queries are some of the hardest. Like, every writer will tell you, queries are some of the hardest things to write. You have to get so much packed into such a tiny space. So, of course, Kirsten actually found me through a contest. So you can get an agent out of it as well. But mostly, like, the feedback you get from it is really, really valuable. And you never know what's going to come from it. Like, Kirsten offered, and I also, 3 days before I was set to accept an offer of representation, I got an email from an agent that I had never queried. And she had been scrolling through old Twitter pitches, and she came across mine. She thought it was interesting. And she wrote to me and said, is this book still available? I said, well, technically. And she read it in under 24 hours, and she did make me an offer of representation as well.
Wow.
You never know. Like, putting yourself out there through different means and getting all the help you can. You never know what's going to come out of it.
So that's a matter, to some degree, all the listeners are probably writing in different genres. So you're probably going to Google something like writing contest and your genre, like romance writing contest, fantasy writing contest, middle grade writing contest.
So, of course, there are some contests that go across genres and categories. Pitch Wars is the most famous one, where, like, established people in the publishing world, published authors or editors or agents, like, they'll take on one mentor for a period of a few months and prepare them for submissions to agents. That, like, Pitch Wars goes across everything. I entered, I think, a similar contest. I think it was called First Pass Pages, where you just go the first page of your manuscript, and you also submit that to, like, agents can also look at that and make requests. And then there are some specialized ones. Like, definitely you should look at who are the judges for this contest, and like what's, what are the prizes? What do you get out of it? There are definitely contests that are of varying quality. So do the research for sure. But many of the people who are running the contest are doing so because they want to help, right? They want to help writers out. And if they've got the influence to get agents interested as well, it's always worth a shot.
Excellent.
So definitely contests. Also, like, don't get starry-eyed over the big agents.
Yeah.
Like, recently we've been hearing some terrible horror stories about agents in the young adult community
Oh,
who have
no.
been immoral or doing even illegal things for their clients,
Oh,
or to their clients, I should say. And the stories are coming out, and some agents are facing repercussions, and some of the agents had an enormous reputation before all of this came down. And even the agents who are perfectly reputable and very good, just because they're giving someone else a 7-figure deal doesn't mean they're going to get you a good deal.
yeah.
And it all comes down to how you guys work together. So, like, I've seen a lot of people who only want the biggest agents ever, who represent the top of the top in their genre. And I think you'll get a better working relationship with an agent who truly understands your work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course, yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your agent does for someone else. It matters what they're doing for you.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And you were talking about making sure that you had relatively matching visions so that you will work well together.
yeah. And that was for sure the best piece of advice I received while I was trying to figure out how to make my decision. So I think my last piece of advice is to write short stories. We talked about it a little bit. Like, I
Yeah.
do think it's so valuable. You hone your craft. It's it's a quicker way to figure out where our weaknesses lie in storytelling.
Yeah.
I had a lot of structural weaknesses when I started really getting into writing professionally and taking classes on short stories and getting feedback time after time. It really builds up. Finally, you realize, like, oh, the last 15 short stories where I've gotten personal feedback, they all say the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Weak
Yeah.
characters or a weak ending or something like that. So you can really start to put together an idea of where you need to make your writing stronger without querying 200 agents and giving up and putting in all this effort. I think
Yeah.
it's so valuable.
And
And
so
you'll
much.
get in. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, yeah, and quicker because you're getting feedback right away on something short rather than waiting 6 months or 12 months for someone
Yeah.
else to get back to
Yeah.
you.
Well, I will say it does also give you an idea of how long publishing can take. You
Yeah.
know, I published my first short story under my real name, and I think like, I wrote it, I sent it in, 3 months later I got the acceptance, 1 year later I got paid, and the short story was actually published. So,
Oh,
and like right now I've submitted a short story that's been out for about 6 months almost.
yeah.
And they say they try to respond within 6 months, but you can there are some websites where you can look at how long they've been taking to respond to other writers, and it's like 200 days, 250 days, and that is really how publishing works in the traditional sphere. And
Yeah.
it helps. It's definitely helped me keep my cool when I've been wondering, like, why hasn't this agent responded? Oh, because it's been only 2 weeks. Okay, I don't need to freak out that much.
Yeah. All right, that's really great advice, especially in this, our 21st century world. Everything is going faster. We're using technology to do
Yeah.
things, excuse me, quicker, and we get such an immediate response by posting anything to social media that it's
Yeah.
really hard to remember that some things in life still take a lot more time,
Yeah, for sure.
but are worth it.
I think so. Like, it's super valuable, and it builds up over time. So I feel like I have, a few things on my published works page now.
Yeah,
And when I started my website, I had like nothing. I
right.
had
As
my
we all
novel
do.
out, but this isn't its actual named on publication, and I don't have a photo of it, and I I don't even have a link to Goodreads.
Right, right.
So
Well, even this book, didn't you tell us at the writers group meeting this is the second title and the second cover?
that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully it'll not change in the next 6 months, but technically, I suppose it could, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't think it will.
Yeah.
The reaction to the cover has been pretty universally positive.
Oh,
So I
good.
think Little Brown's going to stick with the cover. So,
Nice. All right. So if anyone wants to see the cover, go to Amazon.com and not Google, but search for We Rule the Night
yeah.
by, and it's your full name, right? Claire Eliza
Claire
Bartlett?
Eliza Bartlett. Yeah.
Nice.
And I've
Such a
got a
great
link on
name.
Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, and IndieBound. So if you're not an Amazon fan, you can still go.
That's
And
right. I always forget to say stuff like that because in my mind it's like here or any place else that you want to look for it.
sure,
But
yeah.
yeah,
But it wasn't on
cool.
IndieBound for a little while, so I'm very pleased now that we've got a copy set up on IndieBound.
That's awesome. Well, listen, if people want to learn more about you, your work, and where can they find you?
So, yes, my author website, authorclaire.com, is a place where you can get in touch if you have specific questions or if you just want to see who am I and what do I do. I've got a bio and a link to my work, especially those free short stories where you
Excellent.
can read them. And I am on Twitter and Instagram mostly as Bartlett.
Can you spell that for us?
Sure. It's Bartlebett. Bartlett.
Bartlett. Okay.
Yeah. And if you search for the same on Facebook, I do have a Facebook author page that gets updated every so often. I'm more active
Okay.
on Twitter and Insta.
Excellent. Claire, thank you so much. You've been
Thank you.
greatly helpful to people who are listening. I know it because I know that I've had some of these questions in the past. And so I'm sure that you're also going to be finding at some point in the universe that you have
Yeah,
really encouraged people who needed a little bit of encouragement today. So thanks for
I
that.
hope so. Good luck to everybody. Yeah. And I'm sure
Excellent.
that there will be so much in 5 years that I'll listen to this and say, why did I say that? That's the worst advice ever.
Well, that's our fast moving world that we live
Yes.
in.
I look forward to learning a lot.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.